Evolutionary Underground episode number 21. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about spring cutting cycles with Geneza Pharma. So this is going to be a great one. So we're going to cover everything in this podcast and help you get your cutting cycle ready for the summer. Now, most of you out there, you go from winter really, really cold. Some days you're trapped at home. It's so damn cold outside. Some days there's so much snow and ice out there you can't even go anywhere. So spring comes, you get really excited. You're able to go. You don't have to worry about going to the gym. You don't have to worry about going for a jog. You don't have to worry about doing things outdoors. So spring is a really exciting time of the year for a lot of you out there. Of course, people like me who live in hot climates year round, or people in the southern hemisphere, it's a different situation. But for most of you, it's going to be that lifestyle where your lifestyle really, really improves and you really, really enjoy spring. So, Mobster, tell us a little bit about springtime and how your strategy changes from the winter to the spring.
I think this thing is, Steve, is almost psychological, and I've actually touched on this in previous podcasts. We are, after all, essentially, and we don't think that we are, but we are animals, and therefore we're affected by nature. So there's even a poem which I think it says about young men's minds turn into thoughts of romance or something like that. So essentially, what happens is in the winter time, our body's more likely to store fat. You've got people that have issues with regards to not seeing the sun. We're way more wrapped up, as Steve says. You're indoors more. When you're outside, you're rushing to get in the car. You're rushing. You don't want to hang around for public transport. Your vibe is different. Now, obviously, in modern times, with central heating, with the kind of clothes that we wear, it's a little bit different from primitive man, but we're still affected by the sun. We're still affected by the heat. So, for example, Steve, we start to see, plants come back to life, flowers start to bloom, and they're getting ready for the sun. They're getting ready for the spring. Their nature is turning towards replicating and breeding and whatever else. And whether we like to deny it or not, we're the same. So, and as the majority of our listeners will be male, they're obviously going to have some female listeners too. The idea that we can reveal our hard work in the gym, the idea that we're going to kind of feel, let's be honest, Steve, basically more sexy as testosterone goes up in the summer. So as Steve says, if you live in certain parts of the world, like Steve does, it's kind of warm all year round. It's just warmer in the sun. For us over here in the UK, and for lots of places, especially in the top part of the Northern Hemisphere, Norway, Sweden, Steve's got places where it's inside the Arctic Circle. So there's places that's real far north where they don't see the sun at all for 2 or 3 months at a time. Trust me, guys, it has an effect. And part of that effect is us wanting to get lean, us wanting to show off our hard work, us wanting to look good in front of the girls, in front of our partners, in front of other people. Even Joe's down the gym wanted to show other Joe's down the gym just how ripped they are. It's that kind of vibe, and it's nature. Now, spring does that. Honestly, guys, people's moods increase. You're more likely to go out and stay outside and just chill. So the idea that you want to get in shape, that you want to get fat, that you want to use Geneza to do that, it's just kind of normal. It's nature, Steve. Back to you.
Another thing that comes in the spring is fruits and vegetables. And right before spring, kind of the late winter, you'll notice in your supermarket, if you're eating healthy, if you're eating like a lot of your fruits and vegetables, especially with fruits, it becomes a lot harder to find good quality fruits. Maybe you'll see some type of blueberries, and those are on sale. Organic blueberries, really, really good. But other than that, tropical fruits, things like bananas and stuff like that, you can find those year round. They grow in the tropics year round. They have different varieties that are able to grow and be harvested year round. But when it comes to other fruits, it becomes really, really hard to find good, fresh, locally grown fruit. So now your options open up during the spring when it comes to your produce, your fruits and vegetables. These are where your antioxidants, your vitamins and minerals come from. And these are very, very important. Also, electrolyte balance and hydration. So these are really important going into the spring too. So now you're able to use these as a weapon alongside your steroids. And we're going to get into our steroids talk in a second. Mobster, why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk about Geneza Pharma and why Geneza Pharma is such a potent brand.
Here's the thing again, Steve. In nature and in the winter time, you kind of get, listen, the people that listening to this podcast are people that train. They kind of get it about nutrition, and they're listening to this podcast become better informed, those that don't know much about nutrition. And it's quite simple. If you was an average Joe, if you didn't train, it's kind of normal to eat fattening foods and to store that around your body to protect you from the cold winter months. So fruit is kind of available. It's grown in polytunnels, grown under glass. As Steve says, brought over half frozen, sometimes from the tropics. Half ripe bananas brought over still green in the holds of ships and so on and so forth. But be honest, guys, are you thinking about having fruit? Are you thinking about eating healthy? Are you getting your lettuce and your salads in? You're not really thinking like that in the winter time, and that's just the truth. And again, that's kind of normal. I get it. But obviously, we're kind of healthy minded. At least we try to be. So we're not trying to think too much about junk food. But your diet's going to have more calories, and you're going to want to protect yourself from the cold, etc. In the summer months, again, like Steve says, a combination of two things. You're going to want to eat more healthy. I do, Steve. I have way more salads in the summertime because it's hot, and I don't want heavy foods. I don't want to be sweating because I had a big, heavy, fat kind of meal. Equally, and this is what I think Steve's getting at as well, is a lot easier to get fresh, organic, properly grown fruit, local stuff, which can be grown because it's spring, but it can be grown because the summer's coming. And it's as simple as that, Steve. You want to eat more healthily because you don't need that heavy food sitting in your stomach. And it's a lot easier to do so. As Steve said, I've seen, listen, I can go to the frozen section of my supermarket right now and buy strawberries and blueberries and whatever else. But fresh strawberries, Steve, I brought some the other day to make some ice cream with. And I'm telling you now, these were grown in some sort of polytunnel or something. They're not the same as the stuff that I'm going to be able to get in a few weeks' time, a few months' time, Steve. It's just going to be on another level. So it's a lot easier to eat healthily. It's a lot easier to get all the fresh fruit. You're more likely to put a salad on the side of your plate than something heavy like pasta and whatever else. And again, our minds, because we're doing this podcast, because you're listening to this podcast, are going to be more about having that kind of food and the accessibility to it, Steve. Back to you.
Let's get into Geneza Pharma, and then we're going to talk about different spring cycles that a mobster and I were digging up on the pre-show that we really like here. Geneza Pharma is one of the top brands in the world. And one of the reasons they are the top brands in the world is the quality of the gear. So when you use Geneza Pharma, you're using high quality, top level anabolic steroids. This isn't normal steroids you get at the gym from some guy who has a bathtub, at home and makes his steroids in the bathtub or a sink or something. Okay. Some guy, with, he hasn't showered in a week and he's making recreational drugs, smoking, recreational drugs, and then he's making your steroids along with it. He's not a doctor. He has zero medical background. He's just some dude who knows how to brew stuff, okay? Illegal stuff at home. So you're really going to put that in your body? No, of course not. Geneza Pharma is made in actual lab by actual medical professionals, actual doctors. They're tested. They have certificates analysis on their website. It's a legitimate company. They're legal where they are, and they are able to provide anabolic steroids worldwide in countries where anabolic steroids are legal. And, and of course, these anabolic steroids do end up on the black market. They're able to sell them the black market in countries where steroids are a gray area and where you need a prescription for them. So you're able to get your hands on these top quality anabolic steroids that you wouldn't be able to get just from your gym dealer. So this is why Geneza Pharma is trusted, they're approved, and they're excellent gear. You will know the difference when you use Geneza Pharma. If you're using other anabolic steroids that are inferior, once you switch to Geneza Pharma, you will feel the difference in purity. It's like going to the drugstore and buying the pharmaceutical brand of the drug versus getting the over-the-counter brand of the drug. You can tell the difference. Even though they claim they're the same thing, you can tell the difference. It's just manufactured better, and it's worth every penny that you're going to put in your body. Why run a steroid cycle? Why run a steroid cycle and spend all that money, waste all your time if you're using inferior gear? So always, you'll never hear me say to put inferior gear in your body. Know what's going in your body. And it's very, very important. So Geneza Pharma, 2 thumbs up, excellent brand. And yeah, Mobster touched on that a little bit, and we'll get into some steroid cycles for the spring that you're going to enjoy for cutting.
I echo everything Steve said. I mean, I've touched on this before, right? First off, we have approved sources for a reason, and Geneza's right up there as one of our approved sources. And it goes down to things like Steve said. If you go to the actual Geneza website, not one of the companies that sells their products on their behalf, but the actual Geneza website, there's a picture of the factory right there for you. You can then go and you can buy products that way, but you can then go down and they talk about the whole medical use of their products. You can, as Steve said, and this applies to some of our other approved sources as well. I want to see certificates of analysis. I want to see regular feedback. I want to see a quality produced product or quality packed product. I want to see numbers that I can check the product is legit and all these kind of things. And that's how we do test sales, all this kind of stuff. That's how a product gets approved. That's how a company gets approved, or an agent for a company gets approved, right? So Geneza is that. It is a very, very good example. You're actually dealing with the pharmaceutical company that makes the product, not a company that represents them, not an agent for them, not someone that sells other brands. Geneza is that company. Now, guys, in this day and age, even with the UGLs and the way that products are produced, and even like Steve said, the idea that some guy has, and we kind of joke about this in the industry when we said about producing products in a bathtub. I think I referenced something in a recent podcast, Steve, when I said I'd seen a video some years ago on YouTube where the guy had essentially wrapped his kitchen in polythene, and he had a mask and an apron and all the rest of it. But guys, he was making steroids in his kitchen. I've talked about seeing steroids made on camera on a Dave Croston video in a microwave with a coffee table. Geneza has a photograph, mind you, of the building, the business, their address, all of that kind of stuff. So you want that. You want that from a brand. You want that from a product that you're going to use. You want to know, as Steve says, 100% that something that's going into your body is set up, has been produced, everything in that specific way. And then, of course, we get into the actual feedback. Guys, if I go to the supermarket right now and I buy, I don't know, a pie, Steve, and the pie is absolutely fucking amazing, I go on Facebook and say, oh, the pie that I just found at the supermarket, guys, you've got to go out and buy this. And it sounds like a silly analogy, but that's what you're doing when you give feedback. You've said, I've tried this product, I put on 12 pounds. I tried this product, I put on half an inch. That's the kind of feedback that we see all the time, on top of all the other things, Steve. So that's precisely why we highly rate, recommend, and tell you that if you're going to make a choice, Geneza is one of the ones that we would tell you to take. 100%, Steve. Back to you.
So let's get into the fun stuff now. Let's talk about some spring cutting cycles, compliments of Geneza Pharma. The first one we're going to talk about, how could I not start off with Trenbolone? So Trenbolone, it's the king of all steroids out there. And some of you are going to run Trenbolone, and even if your diets aren't optimal, and even if your workouts aren't optimal, you're still going to shred on this stuff. Okay? So look, Mobster and I, we always tell you, get your diet and get your training on point. So imagine those of you who react that well to trend, if you got your diet and training on point and you stop being, lazy when it comes to this stuff, right? So trend, absolute beast. Geneza, excellent trend, very clean trend. It's going to cut down on your trend cough because it's such a clean brand. Trend Ace, 100 milliliter vials. GP, they also have GP Trend E 200, which is 200 milliliter. If you want to pin less often, so the Trend E pin twice a week. Trend Ace, you want to pin every other day. Some will go every day. And then they have a third tren option, GP Tritren 150 milligrams a milliliter. And that's 50 milligrams of Tren-A's, which is short ester, 50 milligrams of Tren-E, which is the enanthate ester, longer ester, and then 50 milligrams of the Tren-Hex, which is kind of a middle ester. So you get 3 different trends in one vial. So it's pretty cool if you want to try the Tritren. If you've never used the mix of Tren and you want to try it, that would be a good option for you. But Tren is absolute beast. You can use the Tren and you can use it solo, or you can use it with other steroids as part of your spring cutting cycle. But it makes a good base if you wanted to just start off with Tren and then go from there. Hell, you could stack Anabar with it, T-Ball with it, Proviron with it. The options are unlimited. A lot of people like to stack Masteron with it too. Really, really good stack with Masteron. So we'll get, Mobster, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, one of the things that Steve and I talked about in the pre-show was, I know we've actually discussed this in many of our shows before, guys, that side effects from Tren can be a right pain in the ass, and they're especially true in the summertime. You get the Tren sweats and the Trensomnia, and there's that proper heat of the summer. It can be for some people too much. So one of the things I said to Steve in the pre-show, I said that, why do we recommend Tren? Well, because it's a great recouping drug. Why do we recommend Tren? Because people get into shape. And as Steve says, if your diet is poor, you can still get into shape, or some shape with Tren. But if your diet's on point and if your cardio is on point, exactly like Steve said, then the ability for Tren, for many, many of our listeners, to get them into lean shape, great shape, rip shape, is tip top. But here's the thing I said to Steve in the pre-show. This time of year, to my mind, is actually perfect, Steve, for Tren, because it's just cool enough that you're not gonna absolutely struggle the way that some people do with the Tren sweats and literally be getting up and changing their sheets and that kind of stuff. It's just cool enough. If we get into June and July, Steve, I would hate it. I would hate, even I don't have air conditioning here. It's not common in the United Kingdom. It's literally leave your window open and have a fan on the bedside table. Now that can be the case with some people with Tren year round. But this year's kind of this time of year, sorry, Steve, to my mind, is almost the best time. You're not out of shape. You're not carrying too much fat, which again, Tren sweats will be horrendous if you are carrying high body fat. And I've talked about this before. But if you're just starting to get lean, if your cardio is just starting to bring your body fat down, and it's just cool enough. So to my mind, GP Tren at this time of year is probably the best time to use it if you struggle with the side effects, Steve.
All right, so let's move on to the next steroid, Mobster. Let me do one more, and then you can do a couple that you really like here. So next one, I touched on it, T-Bol, Winstrol, and Proviron. Now, these 3, what do they have in common? They're all orals. However, the Winstrol, there is an option with Geneza. If you'd rather inject it, it's GP Stand 50. And that one, you can inject it if you'd rather go the injectable route. But I recommend the Winstrol taking the tablet. You can also drink the liquid, obviously. It's going to work the same way. But, it's always better just to go ahead and take the tablet. It's more flexible. You have the GP Winstrol 50. You have the GP Turinabol 25. And those numbers mean how many milligrams each tablet is. So with the GP Turinabol 25, for example, you're going to take a look at it and you're going to see that it has 50 tabs in each packet. So if you're going to run, let's say, 25 milligrams a day, each packet will last you 50 days. With the Winstrol, it's 50 milligrams a tab, but each packet only has 20 tabs. So if you're running 50 milligrams per day of the Winstrol, it's only going to last you 20 days. So you got to keep that in mind. So the Winstrol is going to be quite pricey because you have to buy a lot more packets than you do of the T-Bol, even though the T-Bol packet is a little more expensive. And then you have the GP Proviron 25. The GP Proviron 25 milligrams a pill. And it's cheap. But again, it only comes with 20 tabs. So if you do 25 milligrams a day, it's only going to last you about 3 weeks. So if you want to do it for the whole cycle, you're going to have to get multiple packets of it. So it's not expensive though. So it's very, very affordable. Now, these work good in a stack when it comes to cutting. I would not run them by themselves. Definitely want to stack them. So you could stack any of these three, what I talked about at the beginning with the trend, and you can run it that way. Now, if you run the trend and the Winstrol, the side effects are a little strong. I'm not really a fan, but I absolutely love trend with either T-Bolt or Proviron. And those will really, really stack good. So the way you could do it in that situation is run the trend 6 to 10 weeks, depending on which trend you choose. Remember, there's 3 different types of trend. And then you could go ahead and stack in the Proviron the whole way, since Proviron is not liver toxic compared to the other oral steroids. Now, T-Bolt and Winstrol are liver toxic. So you want to stick to 6 weeks or less with any severely liver toxic oral. And that is a way to kind of take care of your liver. Because remember, the trend is also going to hammer your liver, even though it is an injectable. So those would be really, really good options. I go the low route, the trend 200 to 300 milligrams. That's a starting conservative dose on the trend. And then with the Proviron, you can go anywhere from 25 to 50. Turinabol, anywhere from 25 to 50. And then the Winstrol, I would go 25. So you cut the tabs in half, or I would go 50 and see how you tolerate it with the trend. If you don't tolerate it well, then you can always cut the Winstrol off. So that's how I would do if you wanted to run a trend plus an oral stack for your spring cutting cycle through GP. That is a good, cheap option, and it's very simple to do, and anybody can get good results on it. So, Mobster, what'd you have in mind?
There's a couple of choices here, Steve. Bearing in mind my comments just now about the trend, I'm actually going to pick one here and talk about GP's clenbuterol. And now I make sure that I say what I've always said before, guys. If you struggle with anxiety, if you have issues in that particular area, some of you, the way that clenbuterol makes you feel might cause you problems. For those of you that recognize that it's the drug and not you freaking out, and can handle the side effects, I think, again, like I just said with the trend, it would also be a good time of year. Now, in terms of Geneza, you've got the 40 micrograms, and again, Steve, like Steve just said as well, you can half that dose with a pill splitter, or you can bite it in half, which I quite often do with pills. I don't worry about if I've got too much in one half of the pill, or a little bit too less in another half of the pill. That's just, it's a few milligrams, guys. It's not worth freaking out over. But if you want to use a pill splitter, and again, to me, it's having these options. So this is the reason what we're talking about here. And you guys are looking to get cut. So these are the options on the table, and Geneza has you covered in that particular regards. So as an example here, Steve, they do one pack is 100 tablets at 14 micrograms, like I said, guys. So you're more than covered in that particular regards. The other one, and I'm a big fan of this, Steve, as you know, is that they have options for Anavar. And in fact, they've got 2 options for Anavar. One is specifically called GP Oxan, and that is their 10 milligram product. And they also do a GP Anavar 50. That's the actual name. And so that'd be 50 milligrams a pill. And for me, Steve, that would probably be my choice, because I'd have to play around with cutting pills in half on the 10 milligram pills and whatever else. I'd probably go for the GP 50. And in fact, that's my personal preference right now, the cycle that I'm running. And I will just split the pill, half a pill in the morning, half a pill in the afternoon. And again, for me, Stephen, I've said this before, it is a low-level lean mass gainer and a little bit of a strength boost. And funny enough, the trend has that particular reputation as well. But again, I would say specifically, I'm never looking to gain a lot of mass on this cycle. And as we're talking about cutting and not gaining mass, not getting super strong, picking the right product is the way that you want to go. And so you're looking to get cut here, guys, rather than grow. So a few pounds of muscle tissue, which is always the way it is when I take Anavar, and that perfect diet, cutting, doing the cardio, putting the work in. And as I said again at the beginning, that right time of year, and especially, as I say already, Steve, with regards to the clenbuterol. But I will reiterate that point that I made earlier on. Guys, if you've never used Clen, take the smallest amount that you possibly can and find out if it causes you that anxiety issues that I touched on. If you have used Clean, you'll know, some of you that do struggle with anxiety issues or symptoms of anxiety, Clean can make you feel like that. And I have say, guys, there are other options, but it's just that I'm giving you the option that I think that most people would take, especially when it comes to a cutting cycle. So there's a couple of combinations there. Well, Steve will do another one, and I'll come back to him in a sec.
So let's get into this one. A lot of you guys are probably asking, can I run testosterone here? So GP does have a testosterone blend called GP TMX 400. And this one, not a lot of people know about, but let me talk about it a little bit. And this is an interesting one. If you are a good responder to testosterone and you are able to cut on testosterone, which some of you may be able to do. I know a lot of the physique guys out there, they will run testosterone at really high dosages, which is shocking to me. But they'll also run an AI with it to counteract any type of the estrogen effect because they react really well to testosterone. Some of you will react very well to tren. Some of you won't. Some of you react really well to testosterone. Some of you won't when it comes to cutting. You see? So the only way to know this is to try it yourself. So let's say you've run testosterone before and you're like, damn, I react really good to it. I'm able to cut on it. I really like what it does to my physique. So this is a great blend, TMX 400 from GP. And this is a blend of Masteron, 100 milligrams a milliliter, trenbolone enanthate, 100 milligrams a milliliter. So the Masteron is also enanthate. So these are long esters. And then it's got testosterone enanthate, 200 milligrams a milliliter, double the dose. So you're getting 200 milligrams of the testosterone and then 200 milligrams split between the Masteron and tren. So it's made up of mostly testosterone with Masteron and trenbolone at half the dose. And then if you add the Masteron and trenbolone together, it equals the amount of testosterone. So this is really good for those of you who really, really like testosterone being a big part of your cycle. And you can get this blend. It's 400 milligrams a milliliter. So 1 ml, 1 cc is 400 milligrams of these steroids. So you could run this twice a week. So if you did it twice a week, you get 400 milligrams of testosterone, 200 milligrams of Masteron, and 200 milligrams of the tren. So this is a really, really good one for you who are good responders to this. And this one you can cut on. And this one you'd run around, you want to run it 10 to 12 weeks. And then you may want to look into getting some aromacin with it. And GP does have aromacin. And aromacin will help with the estrogen issues, but so will the Masteron. Because Masteron is a good anti-estrogen too. So it really depends on the person. But if you're running 400 milligrams of testosterone, really good idea to at least have the AI on hand and utilize it if you have concerns about estrogen issues. So this is a really good one that you should really give this one a shot. So Mobster, you want to talk about maybe the GP Andro mix?
This is Steve. I'm just looking at their Turinabol product, funny enough. GP Turinabol 25 milligrams a pill, 50 tablets to the sachet there. Touch on what I've just said before for the previous product. You're not looking for a massive amount of muscle tissue. In fact, let me touch on this briefly, Steve. We've talked about T-Bol in previous podcasts, specifically invented by the East Germans so that the athletes didn't come in overly muscular. There were big issues at the time with the women, never mind the guys, turning up and look like absolute freaks, and everybody was being accused of drug abuse, and rightly so, to be fair, Steve. So T-Bol was developed by the East Germans, actually has a Stasi name. It was listed for it. You can look this up and check it out, guys. And what they basically was looking for was a product that added a little bit of lean mass, which is great for someone like us, Steve, and a little bit of strength, which again, I think would be perfect in this situation. And as I say, so you didn't come in looking like an absolute freak, looking like a man if you was a woman or whatever else, and they were less inclined to drug test you. Now, for some of you, and this is a thing that's actually a bit of an issue sometimes, where you make such a dramatic transformation, people are going to give you shit. and they're going to accuse you of doing this and they're going to accuse you of doing that. And of course, it negates all the hard work, Steve, that you're doing with the cardio. It negates all the hard work you're putting in the kitchen and at the dinner table with your diet and all the stuff that you're doing in the gym just to get into shape. So it's kind of annoying. But to me, it's as I said, in terms of the actual pharmaceutical response that we're looking at here, a little bit of lean mass and a little bit of strength is perfect. And Geneza has you covered with Turinabol 25 for that particular reason. Steve, we've talked about in previous shows, you can diet on what we call a bulker, but it's that much more difficult. So, and I used the analogy before when it comes to this kind of stuff, the right tool for the right situation. And here to me is a product that's perfect in that particular regards because you're not putting on loads of muscular body weight. Guys, trust me, again, spring, you want to get in shape, you're trying to get lean, adding 10 pounds of muscle tissue can work if you're vastly underweight. But if you're already kind of there and you're just looking to get ripped, putting on 10, 15 pounds of tissues, it's kind of difficult and it's actually kind of really hard. You have to be underweight if you're competing to what they call grow into a show. Most of us are overweight and we're still looking to get lean and get cut. And that's what we're talking about here, guys. So a cutting cycle for me, this product, GP Turinabol 25, is perfect, Steve. What's your last one?
Well, I want to talk about the Andro mix a little bit. And maybe you can chime in on this as well, Mobster. So the Andro mix is a really good blend as well. And the Andro mix is different than the TMX 400 because this one is a short ester. So if you want to keep your cycle short 6 to 8 weeks or 10 weeks max, you can do this one. And this one is 50 milligrams of testosterone propionate, 50 milligrams of trenbolone acetate, and then the 50 milligrams of the masteron propionate. And it's 150 milligram per milliliter total, 10 milliliter vial. So each pin, 1 cc pin, you're getting 150 milligrams of the drugs. They're all equal, 50 milligrams each. And this one, a lot of you really, really want to do a hit and run cycle when it comes to your spring cycles because you want to prep something. You want to do something that's a little shorter. And then this way you can kind of prep for your summer cycle. So this one could be a good option for you if you wanted to go that route. And this one, you know, it's different than the TMX because the testosterone is going to be only 50. It's not going to be double what the other two would be. And plus it's a shorter ester. So it's in your system quicker. It's out of your system quicker. The side effects are going to be less because they're not going to have a chance to get high, you know, like a long ester would, where you have to run the long ester longer. These you can kind of run it just 6 weeks, literally just 6 weeks, and then you'll be done. So with this one, you want to be injecting, I would say optimally, I would go, let's see, if you're doing, I would say you want to do at least 2 injections a week minimum. Really 3 would be optimal. So you're getting 450 if you do 3 cc's a week. So you could do basically 3 injections per week, 450 milligrams total. You'll be getting 150 of the test, 150 of the trend, 150 of the masteron. And that was really, really conservative. If you wanted to go more strong, you could do 4 cc's or 5 cc's even. So if you wanted to get more aggressive. But this one, again, some of you are going to react incredibly well to this kind of stack. The masteron is a hardener. So if you're looking to not just cut, but also harden up those muscles, then masteron is going to be the one you can, you definitely are going to love. And it's definitely going to be universally done as a hardener. The one thing I would recommend any cycle you do with masteron is be at least under 12% body fat. Optimally, even less. Optimally less than 10 or 11% body fat, because you're going to harden up muscle that's covered up by fat. That doesn't make any sense. So I really have a lot of respect for masteron for that reason. If you have low body fat, you will absolutely love it.
I'll tell you what it is I like about this, Steve. Firstly, it's been specifically designed by GP as a cutting product. And again, this is something that you don't get in pharmaceutical for medical reasons. It's not that UGLs and labs like GP do something specifically because they know that this is going to be used in that particular way as a performance enhancing drug, or in this particular case, as a drug to get you into shape, guys. And so that's super important. And they've done this because they know that there's going to be popular, that it's going to sell well, and it's what the customers want. I also like it for another reason, Steve, and that is the dosages. I've touched on this before. Some products, even the blends, especially if it's a single ingredient, and I've said this, regardless of the carrier, sometimes the dosages, when they get above 300, is normally above 300 milligrams, so 400 and 500 milligrams we've seen, 450 we've seen, can cause PIP, post-injection pain in some people. They do tend to have a reaction, and then they end up diluting it, which kind of negates the whole point of buying it in that way in the first place. Now, also something I've mentioned in previous shows is that pharmaceutical companies back in the day, when they were producing steroids for medical reasons, very rarely went over 300 milligrams. So what do I like about this? The grand total of all of the three ingredients that Steve's mentioned is 150 milligrams. And that includes the trend. That's only 50 milligrams a milliliter. So for me, it's, in my mind, a much easier to handle amount. And that's assuming, for example, guys, you went as low as 1 mil. I actually think it is, most people are going to go a little bit higher than that. But that still only takes you up to 300 milligrams a shot, Steve, which to my mind, for the combination of ingredients, the fact that it's specifically designed for cutting is nigh on perfect. So guys, this is one of those ones, I don't think these kind of things get talked about enough, Steve. People go and check out what they are doing at Geneza, and specifically this product, because it's been designed, it's in a perfect combination, and the dose is just per milligram, in my mind, nigh on perfect, Steve. 1 or 2 mil, once or twice a week. I think this will be spot on. And again, with the trend, for example, never mind anything else, it's just at that dosage and just at the level. You could tweak it with 1.5, Steve. I think that would be the absolute sweet spot for the trend. And you're negating some of the issues, that side effects that some people get in this particular regards. Back to you.
So now another steroid that we need to talk about is and I really love this from GP, is GP Boldenon 300. And I love it because Equipoise is one of the most versatile steroids out there. So you can stack it a lot of different ways. In this situation, the vial comes with 10 milliliters, 300 milligrams per milliliter. So each cc is 300 milligrams. That's a lot of the steroid. So if you do 2 cc's per week, you're already up to 600 milligrams. That is really cool because it cuts down on injecting and injecting amounts. So if you're like me and you hate injecting, you can literally inject this twice a week and you're getting 600 milligrams. What I love about Equipoise is it's versatile. And we're going to talk about training in a second. But with Equipoise, it's not going to cause a lot of side effects. It's going to allow you to do your cardio and not interfere with your cardio. In fact, it's going to help your cardio because it doesn't cause androgenic side effects like other steroids. It doesn't cause pumps like other steroids. It doesn't cause estrogen issues like other steroids. Okay, so it's not going to dehydrate you like other steroids. So if you're like me, you react incredibly well to Equipoise, and it makes a really, really good cutter. Hell, you could do 1 cc a week and get 300 milligrams. That's a great cycle. It's very versatile in that you can stack it with pretty much any other steroid, and it stacks well. So you could stack it with a little bit of testosterone. You can get the GP testosterone cypionate. Boom. Inject 100, 150 milligrams of that a week. You can inject it with some GP tren. You can take an oral with it. You can take Anavar with it. You can take T-Bol with it. Doesn't matter. It's very versatile. So there really is no wrong way to run Equipoise, especially when cutting. So you're able to basically eat in a deficit and do a lot of fasting and do a lot of things to help reduce the amount of food that you're bringing into your body and cut. And you're able to use the Boldenon as well to do a lot of cardio. It's not going to screw up your cardio. So you can go jogging every day after work, do like a nice light 30-minute jog, or you can do high intensity training for like 10, 15 minutes, high intensity, go and do some hill running up and down the hill, get a nice sweat going, get the heart rate up, build a strong heart, burn some extra calories. So Equipoise has a lot of versatility to it. I love it. I love that they do 300 milligrams a milliliter. So if you're anti-injecting and you don't like taking injections, this is the one that you really need to take a look at when it comes to your cutting cycle for the spring. All right. So, Mobster, any other steroids you kind of want to touch on a little bit before we get into cardio?
I actually just want to reiterate something you just said, Steve, with regards to Bolderone and specifically GP300. I'm going to read from the product description here, guys, so bear that in mind. Now, this is true of a lot of steroids, but again, we're talking about a cutting steroid here. So this is what it says, and think about this when it comes to your diet and typically the less calories and you being more efficient. The increase of protein synthesis and red blood cell count, meaning nutrients are transported throughout the body more effectively, and therefore is a much better drug, and I'm ad hoc in here, for when you're cutting. What does that mean, guys? And we're going to get into, I want to bang the drum on the diet and the cardio and diet tips for cutting stacks in a moment. But basically what it means is we become more efficient at utilizing the food. And of course, typically a cutting diet can be more restrictive. In fact, arguably it should be. And it means you're getting more from your food, which is a lot easier to do when you're using a product like GP Bold 300 because of the way that it acts. Now, again, protein synthesis or increase in protein synthesis is common for most of the steroids that we're talking about here, not for all of them, but for most of them. And basically that means that you're basically utilize more of the protein in your diet. And of course, that's what builds muscle tissue. But again, why equipoise in this particular example? Because in this particular example, you're using it as a cutting drug because it can be used as a bulker, and you are restricting a little bit, or you are eating more cleanly, and therefore you want to get as much out of the food as possible in terms of energy, but at the same time, you want your body to be cutting down on fat levels. You want to show that stuff that you've been working on all winter, you want to shine. And I think for that particular regard, Steve, it is a much better product. There's also one more thing, and Steve may have mentioned this already. For those of you genetically predisposition, vascularity. Now, vascularity in and of itself is not a specific thing that means you are lean. I've seen very vascular guys with almost no separation, and it can be very, very genetic, Steve. I think I know that I'm getting the tiniest bit lean when I've got a vein or two popping up on my shins, and you can just about see veins starting to come through. Certainly the blue lines beneath my skin around my shoulders. Again, and that's in the summertime when my skin thins out. Some of you guys will look like absolute road maps. You really will. And we've had users say, how do I get my vascularity? Well, you need to be lean, guys. You need to be hydrated. But again, in this particular example, if you are predisposition, if you are lean, and if you are hydrated, EQ, GP, Bolderone 300, it specifically aids that particular condition. If you're going to be vascular, it's going to enhance your vascularity, Steve. So that to me is another great reason for using it in that particular regards. But guys, it doesn't mean if you didn't have them to begin with, you aren't suddenly going to have veins afterwards. You need to be lean, you need to be hydrated, you need to be genetically predispositioned to have that. I've seen some absolute freaks covered in veins, Steve. And again, like I say, no separation in the muscles. Other guys separated to hell and no vascularity. But if you've got it, if you're going to have it, EQ, GP, Bolderone 300 will bring it out, Steve. Back to you.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about length of cycling. So, when it comes to anabolic steroids, you may notice kind of we're talking about more shorter cycles. And I think one of the reasons could be the spring. I think for spring, a lot of people like to run more shorter cycles because they want to kind of get ready for summer. Now, if you're doing a long cycle in spring and then you're doing a long cycle in summer, and then before this, you did a long cycle in winter, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to blow up your HPTA. You're going to shut yourself down. You're going to cause a lot of dysfunction. All right. So your pituitary glands aren't going to produce hormones anymore. So it's very important if you do a long winter cycle, which a lot of guys like to do, and then you do a long summer cycle, a lot of guys like to do, you do short cycle in the spring and short cycle in the fall. This way you kind of keep your HPTA more healthy. So I think length of cycle on these spring cycles need to be shorter. So a lot of competitors, a lot of competitions obviously are during the summer in bodybuilding, so we want to basically keep Obviously, the Mr. Olympia historically has been mostly during the summer, right, Mobster? So, I mean, we want to keep our cycles in the spring more conservative and short. So I think with these, nice flexibility with GP. They have a lot of options for you. And we went over them, like the GP Andromix I talked about earlier. They're all short esters. So you can go 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, and then come off PCT and you'll recover really quick. The longer your cycle, the longer it's going to take for you to recover. And if you run too long of a cycle, 15, 16 weeks, you may not recover the way you want to going forward. So you're taking a huge risk when you do that. So I personally recommend you don't run cycles longer than 15, 16 weeks. You keep your cycles short. You get in, you get on, you get off, and you can really have really save your HPTA from having damage long-term by doing that. And plus, you'll save up enough to get ready for your late summer cycle that you can do. And that one you can do a little longer, maybe 12 weeks, 13 weeks. Okay. But really, ideally, you want to really maximum 12 weeks no matter what, if you want to protect your HPTA. So that's very, very important. Mobster, you want to touch on that a little bit?
So guys, here's my thought process. And again, echoing a lot of Steve's sentiments. I tend not to run a great many cycles for the year. I think the most I've ever done is 2, Steve. And again, it completely depends on the individual that's listening to this podcast. Here's what I would do in this particular example. I would start the cut and I would start the condition now, literally right now. So the next 4, 6, 7, 8 weeks. And that takes me through to, as we're recording this podcast, that takes me through just to the beginning or middle of April. Because we're recording it in the middle of February. When it goes live is a bit different, but so bear that in mind. And then from April, I go May, June, which just creeps into the summer. So that gives me an 8-week on PED cycle, but a 16-week total run. And that's my thought process. That gives you time off from whatever you've done in the winter. Like Steve says, plenty of time for a full PCT time off, or as much as you recovery as possible. And you're starting to prep your journey. You're starting to get into shape. You're great. For example, like Steve said with Mastron earlier on, it works best and shines best when you're already kind of lean. As he said, sub 12%. Arguably, Steve, as low as 10% for you to. It's no good having hard muscles under a layer of fat, guys. No one can see it. So the idea that you need to want that to shine and to pop out, you have to be kind of lean. So forget this. What some of you do, and this is the reason why I'm saying this, is sometimes some of our listeners will only start the diet or only start the cardio when they're on a performance enhancing drug stack, when they're on a cutting stack. And I don't want you to do that, guys. I want you to start your cutting and getting lean and getting into shape and improving your conditioning weeks before. The minimum I would actually say, Steve, is 4 weeks, but ideally 6 to 8 weeks if you can. Build up slowly. And think about this as well, Steve. Steve talks about this on the forums. I'm something of a quote unquote strength coach, strength expert, or whatever else. So what do we do in strength and conditioning if we're working with athletes, Steve? We have an annual kind of big training cycle for the whole year. What's my aim for next year? But they also do what's called macro. That's mini peaks through the year, many reasons for getting into shape. And of course, in sports, that would be performance at big games, specific athletic events. Here, guys, we're talking about getting into shape. So I would do a bulking cycle, a strength cycle in the winter time, running up to Christmas or so. Then I have that time off after Christmas. Then I start to think, as we are today, about a spring cutting stack, if I'm that kind of athlete. And that would be around now, as we record this podcast, mid-February. And I would start my conditioning. I would start my cutting now. And in 4, 6, maybe 8 weeks time, I would actually introduce a stack. So that's how you put these things together. That's the thought process. And that's exactly how, in my mind, it starts to work. Also, something, and you and I actually recorded a podcast on this recently, small changes right now, guys, literally right now. So stuff like going out and getting extra steps every day, stuff like starting to remove junk food from the house, even if you're not cutting down on your calories, you just start to eat better, and so on and so forth. So those changes right now are going to make an actual cutting diet, an actual conditioning, the work that you need to get cut, that much easier because you've already started your daily good habits. You've already thrown out the last remnants of any food that you had stashed for the winter time, any of those Christmas treats. It's all been eaten, it's all been binned off, it's all been donated to charity, been given away to friends and family, whatever, so that what's in the house is healthy. Like we said already, you go to the supermarket, you're checking out the veggie section, you're checking out the fruit section, you're starting to think about salads and you're starting to think healthy. And then when you then introduce the actual cutting stack with some of the products that we've discussed, boom, you're ready to rock and roll. You've already started to bring up your conditioning work. Your resting heart rate's starting to come down. Your body fat's already starting to decrease. And then you're introducing the PEDs from Geneza just to give yourself that complete and utter edge, just to bring it all into thingy bob. So I would actually say, Steve, overall, my whole process would be 12 to 16 weeks, but the actual time on cycle, I'm always going to be keen on the shorter lengths. And because we're doing everything else, but because we would have got those good habits and stuff around us ready, getting us ready, 8 weeks. 8 weeks. And another reason for 8 weeks again, guys. First off, it gives me plenty of time off from any other cycle. Secondly, it gives me plenty of time off at the end of this cutting cycle before I do anything else later in the year. It gives you another opportunity, possibly to throw in a third cycle a year, I actually think, Steve, here, because actually it's another thing I said, guys, and this is whether it's bulking or cutting or whatever else. Another reason for preferring the shorter cycles is that you have, as an example, 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off, 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off, and you're still only at 32 weeks of a 52-week year. There's room there for a third cycle squeezed in. So you got, as Steve said earlier on, a winter bulker, or in my case, a winter strengthener, a cutting cycle. And again, as an example here, Steve, if you do, and because I think America's ever so slightly different, and when you tend to take your holidays, it tends to be, for me, summer is June, July, August. But we've got school holidays here, which take you into September, the beginning of September, Steve. So kids go back to school, you can do something else. You've got more time, and it's much easier. And of course, you're not spending the bucks away on holiday. Plenty of our listeners have that thing sometimes where they're getting these cycles together, they're getting cut, they're getting the condition, and then the holiday kind of almost surprises them. Here, guys, you are planning ahead. You are ready to rock and roll. You're listening to this podcast for information, recommendations on Geneza products, and because you are thinking ahead, you've got a pretty good idea when your holidays are going to be, and you want to be in tip-top shape. You want to be in shape for when you're walking around the park, when you're... Here's another one for you, Steve. I'm just going to take a side step here as well. And I actually did this on the gym on Friday. Right, guys, so in the wintertime, we stay wrapped up. And that's the reason, another reason why we bulk. Spring comes, we tend to start thinking about going out in the t-shirt. Maybe not shorts, maybe towards the middle of spring. But we start to take off layers of clothing, Steve. The jacket starts to stay indoors more. So you're more likely, and here's a great one, guys, especially for you younger guys, and I think Steve and I have probably done this. I don't drive, Steve, but I've certainly done it in buddies' cars. The classic going on a cruise with your buddies, and you've got the arm hanging out the window, or the roof on the convertible down, and whatever else. And you're doing that, and you want to show what you got. Now, whether that's a tricep with your car, Arnold's done this, Steve, with the arm pressed up against the side of the car so they can pop that tricep there. Whether it's wearing a vest in the sunshine with the roof down, with your hair all good, and you've had a shave, and you want to show the muscles, and you've got like a vest top on or some kind of t-shirt that's cut away to show the top of your pecs, especially you younger guys. I've seen you on Instagram. I know the stuff that you wear. This is for that time. When the shirt comes off completely, Steve, that's a summer stack. This is a spring cutting stack. So this is when you're just starting. In my case, Steve, it's going to be the massive bloody forearms and popping a tricep, even with the girlfriend driving a Jeep, just for the sheer crack of showing people what the work I've done and letting people know about it. And in fact, this is the stuff I was saying about in the gym, where the guys had 2 or 3 of the guys approached me towards the end of my workout on Friday, and I put them through a brutal forearm workout, which is just hell. You get a pump and you can barely close your hands. And I said, guys, what's the last muscle that you cover up? It's going to be your forearms before you put the jacket on, the long sleeve and the sweatshirts go back on for the winter time. So guys, the summer's coming. The spring's nearly here. What do? We want to show what we got, and we're going to start doing that. I don't know if you have it where you are, Steve, even in the winter time, and I know it's not too cold where you live, but if there's a joke here for the The weather doesn't matter to the postman. They always wear damn shorts. It can be freezing cold and pouring with rain, and our postmen have still got shorts on. I don't know whether they're hardened to it or whatever. But the rest of us, that's not the case. The rest of us are layered up, layered up, layered up. But when the spring comes, those layers start to come off. Your winter coat gets put away. You start to wear light jackets. And we want people to see the results of our hard work. So this is the reason why we do. And again, you are planning, guys. So the way that we're talking, especially with the shorter cycles and pre-training, if you like, and pre-cardio, pre-diet, gives you that much more time off in between. It gives you the opportunity, as I said just now, for arguably, Steve, maybe 3 cycles. You told me the American thing, I think, is towards, you tend to have your holidays towards the end of the summer. And I know where you live is a bit warmer. So some places so goddamn warm, you end up having to stay indoors. Here in the United Kingdom and a lot of places for our listeners, it's not the case. So, it's a chance to get out in the sun. It's been cold as hell here in the morning, Steve, but lovely in the afternoon, almost to the point where I'm taking layers off, and certainly with plenty of blue skies and sun. It's not quite spring properly, but plants are starting to grow. And of course, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, we're blooming. We're starting to come out in the sunshine. We're starting to get some sun on our bones, on our faces, on the backs of our hands, and whatever else. And we want to, again, here's another analogy for you, Steve. I've had this, and I'm sure you have too. Because you and I are covered up in the winter time, even where you live, people are surprised that we've got muscles. They knew that we were big. They knew we were kind of muscular, but they didn't know how muscular we was because they haven't seen our forearms and our biceps and our pecs popping up to the top of our shirts or whatever else. You can just about see the muscles of my thighs sticking through the tracksuit bottoms that I've got on right now and that kind of stuff. But then in the summertime, the spring, it all starts to come out, and definitely that's just about to happen, guys. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, well, I think, it's one of those things where, it just depends on your lifestyle. A lot of people want to look a certain way going into summer. Some people want to, they take advantage of it. There's opportunity to wear, shirts and nice clothing and stuff where you can kind of show off, what you got, go to the beach and all this other stuff. So it's very, very important to do that. I think it's a lot more simpler just to look good year round. So I like to just make sure I keep my 6-pack year round, and I go with that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, let's finish out this podcast talking about diet. A diet, a 6-pack is made in the kitchen. It's not made from steroids. It's not made from anything else. The steroids can definitely help you harden. They can help you dry out. They can help you get leaner while also keeping your muscle. And that's how we use them to our advantage. So, one of the strategies too, fasting, really, really good strategy. You can do alternate day fasting. Some of the steroids, though, we talked about, they don't work good with fasting. The harsher steroids don't work good for fasting. Trenbolone, you do not want to do fasting with trenbolone. Very, very important. However, I talked about EQ. EQ is one of my favorite steroids. You can do fasting with equipoise. So a strategy there, you could run the equipoise every other day fasting. So eat one day, don't eat the next day. You will shred up, you'll keep your muscle, and you'll look really, really good. You could really transform your physique simply by doing that. So try that 10 to 12 week cycle, alternate day fasting with equipoise. If you really, really want to cut down, say you're 15, 16% body fat, you want to cut down to 10, 11% body fat, you could do it. And you would keep your muscle and your strength in the process by following that strategy. So it's a really, really good spring idea to do something like that. And you can really, really get some quick results. So at the end of the day, stick to a natural whole food diet, stay away from processed shit, stay away from things out of boxes, stay away from restaurant food, fast food. All right. Know what's going into your body. Stay away from the refined sugars, refined flour, all the refined foods and all the processed foods that are out there. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So if you do that, you'll have really, really good results. Steroids, they work, but they work even better when your diet and your training is on point. So always, when you're running an anabolic steroid cycle, go into cycle in prime shape, and always have a good diet and training program that you can utilize. That's going to be able to give you that body you want in the end. So, Mobster, finish out the podcast and take us to a disclaimer.
Do you know what, Steve? I'm just thinking about something as you was talking there, and it's one of those little opportunities, guys. So here's a phrase. I want you to represent. What do I mean? You are listening to this podcast. You're getting advice on Steve and the Mobster, and we're talking to you about how good you're going to look. And that's something that we do for ourselves. It's what Steve and I do if we're popping a t-shirt on and showing that bicep, showing that forearm that I just talked about. But here's the thing, guys. If you take our advice, you use Geneza products, you get into shape, you are representing. So I want you to represent, guys. I want you to go out and get cut. Follow the advice that we've given you. Use Geneza and represent. Represent the podcast. Represent Geneza. Tell your buddies, this is how I got into shape. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It is our view and is based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.